Why do victims of workplace bullying stay silent? That is one of the areas that surfaced from my research. And what I found will change how you see every quiet person around you. Welcome to Season 2 of The Belonging Advantage. I'm Dr. Patricia Robinson, and this season we're going deep on workplace bullying, the types most organizations never name, the silence they create, and what it truly costs when people don't feel safe enough to speak. This is research-backed, culture honest, and built for leaders and employees who are ready for real conversation. What happens when an organization already knows about the bullying and chooses to protect the bully anyway? That is not a failure of process. That is a failure of character. Welcome back to Season 2 of The Belonging Advantage. I'm Dr. Patricia Robinson. Last episode, we talked about why victims stay silent. Today, we go further into the institutions that make silence the only rational choice available. This is research-backed, culture honest, and built for leaders who are ready to ask the harder question. Not just what is happening in my organization, but what am I allowing? Let's get into it. Last episode, we talked about silence, about why victims don't speak up, about why in a place like the Cayman Islands, staying quiet is often the most rational choice available. But today's findings goes further, and I have to warn you, it is more uncomfortable than the last one. Because today, we're not just talking about why victims stay silent. We're talking about what happens when the organization already knows and chooses to protect the bully anyway. Welcome back to The Belonging Advantage. I'm Dr. Patricia Robinson, and this is The Research Speaks, the series where I unpack the findings from my doctoral research on workplace bullying right here in the Cayman Islands. The last episode kicked off Season 2, where we talked about silence as survival, right? We talked about how victims, both Caymanians and work permit holders, made a calculated decision not to report what was happening to them. And I said, silence is not a personal failure. It is a systems failure. Today, I want to talk about one of the most painful parts of that system. The part where the organization itself becomes part of the problem. Here is what the research found. In multiple cases across my 13 participants, the bullying was not a secret. Management knew, HR knew, in some cases, senior leadership knew. And the bully was still protected. Not because the organization couldn't see what was happening, but because the organization made a deliberate calculation that the bully was worth more than the person being bullied. The first reason, when we think about why organizations protect bullies, the first reason is the most uncomfortable one to say out loud. Bullies are often high performers. They bring in revenue. They hit targets. They manage up beautifully while terrorizing the people below. And organizations, particularly in competitive, high-stakes industries, have a very hard time holding high performers accountable when accountability might disrupt results. What this communicates to everyone watching is devastating. Your performance is your protection. And if you're not performing at that level, your safety here is conditional. The second reason is particular to small communities. In a place like the Cayman Islands, bullies often have social capital that victims don't. They've been here longer. They have relationships with the people making decisions. They are embedded in the professional and social fabric of this community in ways that make holding them accountable feel costly, not just professionally, but personally. And so organizations protect them, not because they've evaluated the evidence and concluded the bully is innocent, but because the relationship, the network, the loyalty, it all tips the scale. This is what I call the loyalty trap. And it is one of the most insidious barriers to organizational justice in small island contexts. The third reason is simpler and perhaps more universal. Leaders avoid conflict. Addressing a bully is uncomfortable. It requires courage. It requires a difficult conversation that might escalate. It might disrupt team dynamics. It might invite a grievance or a legal challenge. And so leaders do nothing. They tell themselves they're waiting for more evidence, or that it's a personality conflict, or that both sides need to work it out, or that the victim just needs to toughen up. And while they are telling themselves these stories, the bully continues, and the victim watches, and they understand exactly what the organization's silence means. It's going to cost something. It's going to cost something. When you think about what that institutional protection is costing, it's going to cost something. I think organizations often do this calculation without fully accounting for what's on the other side of the ledger. When an organization protects a bully, it doesn't just harm the direct victim. It sends a message to every single person watching. That message is, the rules don't apply equally here. And when people believe the rules don't apply equally, they stop trusting the organization. They stop bringing their full selves to work. They start calculating their own exit. The ones with the most options, they leave first. They're gone. And those are almost always your best people. In a workforce of approximately 89,000, where talent is finite and reputation travels fast, that is not a cost you can afford. Participants described watching colleagues be dismissed, ignored, or subtly discredited when they raised concerns. Several said their observations were a primary factor in their own decision to stay silent. This finding sits directly at the intersection of two pillars of the belonging leadership model that I've spoken about in season 1. And those two are character and conviction. Character is about who you are when it costs you something. When the bully is your top revenue generator and you still address the behavior, that is character. When you protect someone because they're connected, because they're useful, because it's easier, that is a character failure dressed up as a leadership decision. And conviction is about the clarity and consistency of your why. Leaders with genuine conviction don't make exceptions based on performance metrics or social ties. They know what they stand for, and they stand for it even when it's uncomfortable. So I want to give you 3 questions to sit with. And I want you to answer them honestly, not the way you wish the answers were, but how they are actually right now. Question 1 is this: is there someone in your organization whose behavior you have known about and not addressed? And if so, what is the real reason you haven't acted? Question 2, when someone in your organization raises a concern, do they see consistent evidence that raising concerns is safe? Or do they see examples, even subtle ones, that suggest otherwise? And question 3, if the person being bullied in your organization were the high performer and the bully were the quiet underperformer, would you have acted sooner? That last question is one of the hardest ones, but it's the most important, because if the answer is yes, you have just identified where your values and your behavior have come apart. So here is the bold truth about this episode. An organization that protects bullies is not a neutral bystander. It is an active participant in the harm. I know that is a difficult thing to hear if you are in leadership. I know that most leaders don't think of themselves as complicit. They think of themselves as navigating complexity, managing competing interests, trying to preserve stability. But here is what my research shows. The people being bullied don't experience that nuance. They experience the outcome. And the outcome is that they were not protected. Belonging cannot be built on a foundation where some people are protected and others are not. Full stop. The belonging leadership model is not a framework for perfect organizations. It's a framework for organizations that are willing to do the hard work of becoming better. And the first step in that work is being honest about where you are right now. The research doesn't lie. And it doesn't give organizations a pass. What it does is show us exactly where the gaps are so we can close them. Not because we're forced to, but because we understand what's at stake. The next time someone on your team is quiet, really quiet, ask yourself whether their silence is peace or whether it is the sound of someone who has already decided you won't protect them. That question might be the most important leadership question you ask yourself at this moment, this month, this year. An organization that protects bullies is an active participant in the harm. And that's not because leadership is evil, but because inaction is a choice. And every person watching knows exactly what that choice means. It's not about just writing the policy, but being the leader whose behavior makes people believe the policy is real. If this episode challenged you, share it with one person in a position to act. You can find The Belonging Advantage on Spotify, YouTube, and Substack. Subscribe, follow, and join the conversation. I'm Dr. Patricia Robinson. Keep asking the hard questions because that's where belonging begins. Until next time. If this episode moved you, share it with one person who needs to hear it. You can find The Belonging Advantage on Spotify, YouTube, and Substack. Subscribe, follow, and join the conversation. I'm Dr. Patricia Robinson. Keep asking the hard questions because that's where belonging begins.